What's up? I'm John Middlekauff, the host of the 3 and Out podcast, and you can find it below in the description. Also, you're watching this on the Volumes YouTube channel. I need you to subscribe right now, share it with your friends. So let's start with, first and foremost, with Baker Mayfield. And there was a lot of conversation. Like, ultimately, the Jimmy G, Trey Lance conversation is like, could the 49ers keep Jimmy G? Are they going to trade him? Would they cut him? And ultimately, while I do believe that anytime you put all your chips in the middle of the table on a young quarterback, I think you got to pivot and you got to let him steer the ship. Now, for every Patrick Mahomes, a lot of young quarterbacks sink the ship. They go down like the Titanic. I mean, worst case, Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, but a lot of guys just never live up to the hype and become average to below average players, even if they stay in the league for 10 years. That's normal. Most guys do not become top 10 quarterbacks, right? So, but you have to give them the best opportunity to succeed, and you have to give them the voice in the locker room. Andy did it once upon a time when he traded Alex Smith, who was a really good player. Not Patrick Mahomes, but was taking him to the playoffs. Belichick did it last year with Cam Newton. Gave Mac Jones the keys to the car. We'll see what happens with Trey Lance. Ultimately, I think Jimmy is not on the team, but the 49ers like Jimmy G personally. The teammates like Jimmy G. Everyone gets along. They've had a lot of success together. There are probably proponents in the building of like, yeah, we could, if we can get Jimmy at the right price, I wouldn't want him as a backup for $27 million. But if he'll take a huge haircut and be the backup quarterback for $10 million, I'm cool with that. Trey Lance played a couple games and got injured. So you could talk yourselves into that. I would probably tend to disagree, though I think, the George Kittles, the used checks would probably be open with it. I don't necessarily think that's the right move, but I think you could do it if you had to. And then there are the spots where, and I'm not necessarily like this because I don't try to hold on to hate and grudges internally, and I don't have the energy to do that. And when I operate angry and mad, I'm not successful. Like, I don't like where my headspace is. I don't like the way I act. I'm better operating through optimism and through positivity. And to me, like, if you said that to me 10 years ago, I would think that was very cheesy. The older I've gotten, the more optimistic, the more positive I've been, the more just like forget about things and move on, the more success I've had professionally. So I've just conditioned myself to operate like that. Some people can, Dave Portnoy has worth hundreds of millions of dollars, operates out of venom and anger and holds grudges and is revenge, and he thrives on that. We're seeing it with Live Golf right now, Greg Norman. He has a vendetta against the PGA Tour. He's trying to take them down, and it motivates him. He gets off on it. And everyone's different, to each their own. But I do believe, and I do fall under this category, if you were to screw me in business, or if a female were to do something to like, there's no coming back, you can be dead to me. And I think in business, it's easier like, I'm never doing business with this person again. And you could argue that's easier said than done. It's easy to be like, I'll never do business with them again. And then you end up, if you're, depending on what industry you're in, partnering with them again. As a consumer, you may end up buying their product. It's always easier to talk. I do think in football, though, and in pro sports in general, when the product is the person, right? Like the player is ultimately your asset and your product. As a coach or a front office, something can happen. And honestly, it could be an accumulation of things where you never look at them the same, right? You can get into a fight with your wife and or even your kid. This used to happen to me and my parents, and you just hate them. They hate you. There's a lot of anger. Again, hate's a strong word, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of animosity. There's a lot of anger. A couple days later, you're cool, right? It happens a lot with your friends, right? You're like, I can't stand this guy. And then like 3 days later, you're best friends again. We're humans. I do think in sports, though, we've seen time and time again, things happen where you go, there's no coming back from that. And sometimes there's a specific incident, right? You get in trouble, arrested, something happens with a teammate where it's just like, you've crossed the line and there is no coming back from that. And then there is the accumulation of stuff. When I worked in radio, I worked for this boss. I had a great boss that got me into it, loved him, helped, get my career going. And then there was another guy who we all couldn't stand. We didn't respect. And every day that went by, I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can take. And it was like this guy, everything about him. I don't know how I'm working in this environment. I don't know how I can listen to him. I can't go on much longer. And I think once you get internally that, like, I can't look at this I couldn't look at him without internally feeling angry, disgusted, wanting to run away. It was that feeling that I think coaches get and front office people I know get because I've seen it. And clearly Baker, and listen, I don't claim to know a bunch of people in Cleveland. I've heard different stories. A lot of things are leaking out. He was dead internally to Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Dead. Now, Deshaun Watson made it possible for them to pivot in terms of, like, they went and landed this guy, which is kind of a disaster right now. We'll see how it all plays out. But it was very black and white once they got Deshaun Watson. A lot of people kept saying, like, what if Deshaun gets suspended for a year? Couldn't they just roll back with Baker? There was no rolling back with Baker. These guys couldn't. He was never going to be the quarterback for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski ever again. And he was traded a couple days ago. And as reports have come out since, they have been working on this trade with the Carolina Panthers for over 2 months. And like anything, when you're dealing with salary cap space, it's all about money and compensation. But this has been in the works for a long period of time. And I believe, to my core, that if Deshaun Watson, let's say that situation never had materialized. Let's say Deshaun Watson, in a perfect world, loved Houston and was just still in Houston and never chased 17 million massage therapists and didn't have all these lawsuits coming after him, and he was just the quarterback of the Texans, and that wasn't an option. That Baker Mayfield still wouldn't be on the Cleveland Browns. Now, I don't know exactly who their quarterback would be. I'm not saying they would have just, like, signed Jacoby Brissett and been cool with that, but they would have moved on. Because once in these stories coming out, like, Stefanski didn't want to coach this guy anymore. And obviously when things get ugly, the worst stories come out, even though Baker's story was like, he didn't show up to an offensive install. It's like, yeah, buddy, he's the head coach. And then the story was like, yeah, Stefanski was talking with Myles Garrett. Yeah, he's a little higher priority than Baker Mayfield's offensive install. That's why they have other coaches too. But it's just one of those situations where his time in Cleveland ended the moment the season ended. There was a picture that went viral of Russell Wilson. You know, who knows? He could be in Capri. He could be on the Sacramento River. I got no clue. It looks like he's in a body of water, shirt off, bathing suit, Ciara, hanging out. And to put it mildly, and I think I can judge because, you know, my weight can fluctuate. I'm about 175 now. I've been as high as 210. I'm someone who loves to eat, but genetically, I have to be careful because as any human will find out, and some people it hits when they're 15, some people it hits when they're 50, your metabolism slows. And I was listening to this. I bought this finance book, and it actually turned out to be a pretty basic finance book, and I audiobooked it. And I just listen to it sometimes in the background. Some of the stuff is pretty stupid. But they were on this chapter. Again, this is pretty basic, you know, way of thought that kind of debunking the thought that you can get rich by saving. Like, that's not how rich people get rich. Rich people get rich by a ton of different income streams, investments, ROI on investments. It's not just you make $150,000 and every year you save 17. Like that is just impossible. And part of it was most people, the average income, you spend everything you get coming in, so it's not even feasible to save. But they use the analogy of there was this study of people that lost weight. And for a long period of time, and I know this happened to me specifically, is eventually your body gets used to whatever your workout is. And I'm someone who works out probably at minimum 6 days a week, a lot of times 7 days a week. And there was a time when I was like 32 or 33, I started gaining weight. Even though I was eating the same foods I've always eaten, eaten and working out the same amount and doing the same workouts that I've always done. And I probably put on 20 pounds. And I didn't really notice it till a couple years later when I look back at the pictures, like, God, I was a fat ass. And part of it is your metabolism slows down. And part of this thing is like everyone tells you just work out and you'll lose weight. That's not necessarily true depending on your age. A huge element of it, and I can speak to this as someone who's 37 years old, the diet. And I heard this forever when I was younger. The diet. And I always called BS. I like eating ice cream. I like eating sugars. I like eating carbs. You have to change at a certain age. And Russell Wilson is a good example. He's someone who's always been, and Collins talked about this, a lot of people have, spent a lot of money on his body. He's got therapists, workout people, takes it very, very seriously. Well, there was a video at Summer League that LeBron was there and Russell Westbrook was there. Ironically, is LeBron, who's the most pro player guy, always treats his own teammates once they're dead to him like a widget, like Kevin Stefanski treated Baker. Wouldn't even sit, acknowledge, or look at Russell Westbrook. Don't totally blame him, even though the reason Westbrook is on the Lakers was LeBron's idea. But regardless, all these guys are eating snacks, right? People in the front row, ton of NBA players, hot dogs, popcorn, whatever. They showed LeBron. LeBron had like a bag that clearly a chef made him with like almonds and nuts, which they claim to be a very healthy snack. Because, listen, I love to snack as much as probably anyone listening. You know what a good snack is? Bag of Doritos, some candy. Even though the older you get, you realize those are terrible snacks. So my point of all this is the way to lose weight, just like the way to get rich, more income streams than one, and invest. You have to take risks to gain the rewards. The way to lose weight the older you get is to change your diet. You can work out the same you've worked out, but at 35 years old, working out how you worked at 22 won't have the same impact on your body because your body changes. And I saw this picture of Russell Wilson. Honestly, he looked like he was 250 pounds. And I know a lot of people, including the head of the volume, are very bullish on the Denver Broncos. And my one thing would be, is Russell Wilson, who I think is a remarkable player. I've seen him live 3 or 4 times. I think he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Russell Wilson in his prime, and now primes a lot of guys. Aaron Rodgers, MVP at 37 years old. Tom Brady kicking ass in his 40s. Primes have been extended at the quarterback position. But Russell was unique because unlike those guys, now obviously Rodgers can move and still can. Tom kicked ass from the pocket, and Russell can throw a great deep ball from the pocket. But what made him an extraordinary player was his ability to move. Not run like Lamar Jackson, but keep plays alive with his feet. A lot like Mahomes and Josh Allen do now. Now, Josh runs a little more, but behind the line of scrimmage. Deshaun Watson did this too. They weren't actually running a lot. They were keeping plays alive outside the tackle box, then complete passes and keep the chains moving. And last year, Russell, to me, looked slow. And you see this picture, you go, well, why would he look slow? Well, if you add some weight, you're not quite as fit. That doesn't mean his arm's not still awesome. That doesn't mean he doesn't throw a good deep ball. But to me, his weight, I think it's fair to say, is something to keep an eye on. And he's now, forever, he's ran Seattle, right? Him and Pete. Well, now, when I say that, he actually had some pushback. Like, Pete always got to, kind of control the offense, even though he's a defensive guy, loved running the ball. And Russell never truly always thought like he didn't get to cook. And as someone said on social media, he doesn't just get to cook in Denver, he gets to eat as well. He can do whatever he wants. You think Nathaniel Hackett's telling him what to do? No, he's dictating the terms. Now, I don't question Russell's focus. I don't question Russell's, ability to take football very seriously. I believe he does. But I do wonder the diet, whatever he's eating, he ain't 6'5". He's not Eli Payton or Phillip Rivers. He's our most normal human size, 5'10", 5'11". Well, you put on weight much easier when you're really small and definitely show it. So it's just, if he is not above average to awesome for them, Denver would have a problem. And I'm tempted because I'm picking the Chiefs to make the playoffs. The Chargers have the best roster in the league on paper. Even though I don't love their coach, their roster's too good to not make the playoffs. I think Denver and the Raiders made the playoffs last year. They're going to be better now. I just think Denver, everyone's just placing them as a 12, 13-win team. They could. If they get awesome, skinny Russell Wilson, or when I say skinny, he was just thinner, more mobile Russell Wilson, they could be really good. But if they get this kind of bigger version of what we saw last year with an unknown coach, I think it's fair to say there just might be some unknown. It might be I'm not saying I'm going to pick them to not make the playoffs. Something I'm keeping an eye on, though. It's something I'm keeping an eye on. And the Rodgers tattoo thing, I texted a guy in the NFL, and I've defended Rodgers in the sense of, I know he's weird. I know he's different. I do think, Colin and other people compare him to Kyrie. We've seen Kyrie be the alpha on teams. His teams suck. He's not a reliable human. Kyrie can't carry. Kyrie gets injured all the time. I've seen Rodgers literally carry a franchise for a decade. In these last 3 years, he's gone back-to-back MVPs. Now, I've said over and over, he underwhelmed last year in the playoffs. You cannot lose to the Niner team that did not score an offensive touchdown at home. That cannot happen. And I put that even more on him than I do the head coach. But he gets the tattoo. And the tattoo kind of goes viral. Little weird tattoo. I text a guy in the NFL who's probably right around my age, mid-30s. This guy's accomplished, been around for a long time. And I just said, listen, I'm not a tattoo guy. Not because when I was in Scottsdale a couple weeks ago, we went out with another couple, and the guy had been in the Navy. He's in great shape. He had walked on. He played a little college football, and he was tatted up. And the tats, they look good. Like, tats on me would not look good. I'm not yoked. I don't have the muscles. I just never been a tat guy because I think they would look terrible on me. Some people, I'm going, that looks fantastic. Some people pull it off well. Some people do not. A lot of people probably in the middle. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, great shape. He could pull off tattoos. But how often do people, and the guy I was with who was in his late 20s, had probably been getting tattoos for a decade. And I said to the exec, I said, what do you think the average age is for people to get their first tattoo? A guy. I'm just speaking for guys. And we both agreed probably be in your late teens, early 20s. I would say it's a little abnormal to get your first tattoo. Now, some people do it right when they're 45 or 55 with their kid, and they do one of those like a date. Obviously, if something tragic happens, for sure. I'm just talking about non-tragedy, non-family member, your first just tattoo for yourself at 37 years old. Like, it's just a little weird. It's just a little weird. Now, that takes nothing away about his football, but, like, let's not get it twisted. Devontae Adams, and I get he wanted to come back west and have his family to be able to go to games, chose to leave the best quarterback he'll ever play with. And he's going. Derek Carr's a good player. Derek Carr's a $35, $40 million player who can be your starting quarterback on a playoff team. Far and away an above average NFL quarterback, depending on the week, can be like the 8th to 10th best quarterback in the league. But he actively chose to get away from that guy. And I'm not anti-Rodgers hater. But I think it's fair to say the tattoo, a little weird. The timing, it's just, is this guy, I mean, earlier this year, he went on a 12-day whatever in the wilderness where he puked, he pooped, and he did not eat. As I'm recording this, all I've had today is chocolate milk. Usually Monday, Tuesday are my fast day. And when I say fast, like I don't eat breakfast or lunch beside liquids. And chocolate milk is kind of my protein. It just helps me kind of keep my LBs down a little bit. So, and honestly, I don't need to eat as much as I did 10 years ago. So I'm not anti, fasting a little bit. But that 12-day excursion where you just pooped in the wilderness and ate nothing but air, a little weird. You know, Brady's into some weird stuff. He ain't into that. So it just, is Rodgers going through midlife? I mean, he's only 37. To me, midlife crisis is usually like 45, 50. But he's going through some things, you know? Now, in fairness, it hasn't affected his football. MVP, back-to-back years running. Last year, you thought he was going through some things, won the MVP. They were the 1 seed. But, man, what a weird cat. But not as weird as Kyrie, because, again, Rodgers produces. Like, Rodgers literally carries an NFL franchise to the playoffs every year. And he was right on McCarthy. Last, I don't really know what to say on the Zach Wilson thing. Beside, I don't know, man. That's just, I think you would underestimate a guy. I know it sounds weird, your mother's best friend. Zach Wilson's now 23 years old. He makes $8-9 million a year. He's an NFL quarterback. His options for females are probably just different than the average guy. You know, he's got, I would imagine the options he has. Now, you could say, a little weird, not ideal, you know, in terms of maybe his mom, is it going to ruin the relationship? But I also said that the one thing with being a quarterback, everything is evaluated. Everything is questioned. Jimmy G took a single guy, took a porn star out to dinner years ago, and it was a major story for like a week. Now, I think part of it was, you know, the porn star wasn't exactly a 10. I mean, she's probably closer to 5 than a 10, let's be real. She also had a kid in the industry. It was a little weird. It's like, Jimmy, why aren't you dating 10s? What are we doing here? You're like the best-looking guy in America. besides Brad Pitt and George Clooney. Is George Clooney? I guess he's a little older now, but you know what I mean. Liam Hemsworth, would he be considered in that? Like Jimmy, been around a lot of women. Every single one of them signs off on Jimmy Garoppolo immediately. He's got fans of the opposite sex. And when he went out with that chick, you're like, Jimmy, what are you doing? And then people try to justify it like, slid in his DMs. It was easy. Doesn't quite realize the scrutiny's under. And we just kind of like, whatever. And honestly, since, no one knows who Jimmy's dating. And I promise you, you're probably not going to bed alone. But I do think the Zach Wilson thing, you come from Utah where you just could do some weird things. No one really said anything. Now you're in the Big Apple. This is New York. A lot of people paying attention. Good, bad, and indifferent. They're on your ass. So it's just, weird as you want to say it, it's going to be a story that he gets asked about. It's just going to be one of those things, man. Thanks for watching 3 and Out. You can check out the podcast below in the description. And make sure you subscribe right now to the Volumes YouTube channel.